A child? Yes, a child, your highness. She will bear a female child, and the child will be called Akachi.
That's true. But why Ezimo?
Your highness, I can see doom in many years to come, a very great doom. She was given that name by the gods because the gods have chosen to use your daughter for her salvation. So do not speak about changing her gender again, lest you bring the anger of the gods upon you. The chief priest then left the palace, leaving the king to his scattered thoughts. A long, long time ago, in the far eastern corners of the African savanna, was the kingdom of Achala. Achala was a very prosperous and beautiful land that enjoyed peace with all its neighbors. The kingdom was ruled by King Otui and Queen Adiku. King Otu and Queen Adiku had ruled Achala successfully for over 15 years, surviving several conflicts and struggles. They were very happy, as they had everything royals could ever ask for, well, except for one thing. They did not have a child to grace their union. This predicament made the couple, who had been married for over 20 years, very unhappy. They had done everything in their power to have children of their own. Rituals, prayers at several shrines, and even seeking help from the river goddess. All to no avail. It seemed like their situation had no remedy, not until one day. That morning, the queen, with 2 of her attendant maidens, was on her way to the village stream, where she wanted to have her bath and then oversee the affairs of the women in the kingdom. She had not walked up to a mile when she started feeling severe heaviness and dizziness, a feeling she quickly shook off, as she had been awake all night working with her husband, so she thought she was just feeling tired from the sleepless night. A bit further into the walk, she experienced the feeling again, this time much worse. The queen fell to the ground and began vomiting. Her attendants, alarmed, rushed to her, cleaned her up, and carried her back to the palace hurriedly. Upon their arrival, they immediately alerted her husband, the king and King Otu, equally alarmed, summoned the village chief priest at once to help determine what might be wrong with his wife. The chief priest, upon arriving at the palace, immediately examined the queen and made some incantations before turning back to the king with a smiling face, saying, "Your Highness, your wife, Her Highness, is about to have a child." "A child?" the king exclaimed, surprised. "Yes, a child, your highness," the chief priest repeated, reaffirming his words. "Her highness is with child, and that is the reason for her current situation. She will bear a female child, and the child will be called Akachi, which meant the hand of the gods." The king, who had always wanted, if they were to have a child, that it should be a male for the sake of an heir, then asked the chief priest if he could perform the ritual to alter the gender of the child. In the Achala kingdom, if a couple wanted a specific gender for a child, and the chief priest revealed another gender when he came to check on the wife, they could perform a ritual to change the gender of the unborn baby to the desired gender. As the king was still speaking, the chief priest quickly interrupted him with a question. "Excuse me, your highness, but you didn't ask me why I said she should be given a particular name." The king, realizing this, pondered for a bit before asking the chief priest, "That's true, but why Zemuel?" The chief priest looked around the palace a bit, and then stopped in the direction towards the king's throne. He stared at it for a while before saying, "Your highness, I can see doom in many years to come, a very great doom, your highness. She was given that name by the gods because the gods have chosen to use your daughter for our salvation. So do not speak about changing her gender again, lest you bring the anger of the gods upon you." The king quickly apologized for his ignorance and wanted to ask the chief priest more questions regarding the prophecy of doom, but the priest told the king that he needed to leave urgently to attend to other affairs, and that the gods had prohibited him from speaking any further about the prophecy. The chief priest then left the palace, leaving the king to his scattered thoughts. 8 months and 2 weeks later, the queen gave birth to a bouncing baby girl, and she was named Akachi after several market days, just as the chief priest had instructed. Princess Akachi grew up to be an extremely intelligent and skilled child. She excelled in everything from hunting to performing little tasks and assignments given to her by her parents. She was even given a special nickname by the maids and guards in the palace due to her extraordinary abilities and sharpness, even as a little child. She would always tell her parents to give her errands instead of the guards, and could run 7 to 10 miles into the village just to fulfill the tasks her parents had assigned to her. She would also refuse to be accompanied by guards, but despite her refusal, her parents would always send guards with her because of her royal status and safety. She would also assist her parents in the strategic arrangements of the village despite her age. She was loved by everyone who knew her, as she had a very humble, jovial, and respectful character. She would always greet elders during her errands and address the guards and maids in the palace with respect. Among her many extraordinary traits was her great beauty. Princess Akachi was a very beautiful girl with charming dark eyes and a beautiful set of teeth, whose whiteness perfectly matched her chocolate brown skin tone. She grew up to become the most beautiful maiden in the entire village, and every man who set eyes on her desired to make her his. She was said to be blessed with the beauty of the river goddess of Ocean. The village of Achala continued to live in peace and harmony until one day. A neighboring village, Dunu, decided it was finally time to strike Achala. They had been at petty odds with the Achala village and had been planning a secret invasion of the Achala kingdom for over 10 years. They feigned peace with the Achala kingdom so the people of Achala forgot their old issues and were now relaxed and open towards them, and they used that opportunity to gather a lot of info about the kingdom. Now deciding to finally strike, they struck Achala when they least expected, killing the majority of men while raping and taking the women of Achala captive. The king and queen heard about the plan of Dunu, but it was already too late when they learned of it. The only thing they could do was save themselves, but they couldn't do much for their people as their hands were tied. The queen came to the king, crying and shaking as she said to him, "My king-o, my king-o, there is fire on the mountain." The king looked at her, surprised, and then put a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. He then asked her to calmly explain what she meant, and she told him everything about the assault from the people of Dunu, who had already crossed their village borders and had started their ambush on the village outskirts. The king said to the queen after a long, pensive silence, "My dear, we must find a way to escape now, seeing we are the only hope for our village. If we stay here for an extra second, we might get killed, and then the kingdom of Achala will be finished." He opened his mouth as if wanting to continue his speech, but then paused abruptly as he remembered his daughter, her bravery and courage, as well as her great beauty, as she was famed to be the most beautiful maiden in the entire village, and the people of Dunu had a strong tradition of always taking the most beautiful and smartest maidens from any land they captured as maids for their king's palace. He turned to his daughter, the young, beautiful Akachi, and after some silence, he started, "Akachi, my daughter." "Yes, Papa," the young princess replied. "You see everything that is happening in our land. Our people are being captured and killed, and painfully, there is nothing we can do about it. Your mother and I will try to escape to avoid being killed, as we are the light of the village. But you will stay here." The people of Dunu Kingdom have a strong reputation for taking the most beautiful and smartest of maidens from any village they capture as maids for their king, and you will most likely be chosen as part of them, as you are the most beautiful and smartest maiden of our village. He continued in tears, "You will stay here, my daughter. The people of Dunu will capture you and take you to their king as his maid. You will walk there as a maid, but you will secretly be a spy. You will get as close as you can to the crown prince, as he is very attracted to beautiful maidens. Then you will gather information on their military strength and weaknesses and how they plan their attacks, so you can relay the information to us over here. We can use it to get back at them for what they have done to our people and reclaim our land." The king, still in tears, blurted out his last words in anger amidst tight fists and gritted teeth. Calming himself down, he said, "Your mother and I will run into the bushes now, and hopefully, we will be able to make it out of all this alive. I know you won't disappoint us, my daughter, and we will be praying for you always." And with that, he and the queen left and fled into the bushes, leaving behind a crying Akachi. As her father had told her, she stayed behind and was captured and taken to the palace of the king of Dunu, along with 2 other maidens from her village, to work as a maid. Her initial stay was uneventful because, while she was being treated very well as a maid in the new palace, she had not had any real opportunity to meet with the crown prince of the land to officially begin her secret mission. One day, she heard that there was a festival in the land coming up in 8 market days, and that they, the maids, were to serve. She also heard that the prince would be in attendance, so So she was very happy and came up with a plan that would give her a chance to finally meet the crown prince. On the day of the festival, as she had thought, the crown prince was in attendance and sat in a reserved spot for royals, together with his family. The prince, Prince Ifejoha, was a very handsome, intelligent, but arrogant prince. He had all the girls in the realm dying for him due to his charm, wit, and status. Fully aware of this, he took good advantage of it, using women as his toys and shedding and disposing of them the next day as if nothing had happened. Princess Akachi heard that the maid who was to serve the royal section of the festival was sick and couldn't come, so she disguised herself in the maid's clothes and headscarf. Unbeknownst to her, the crown prince, who had spotted her and taken some interest in her due to her great beauty, had seen her wear the scarf of the other maid, but he kept quiet about it. The princess posed as the other maid and sat in her place, giving the crown prince flirtatious looks and occasional hand brushes. The crown prince also took note of her strange actions, but knowing who she actually was, he kept quiet, planning to approach her later that night. Later that night, as the festivities were winding down, Princess Akachi, still in her disguise, took an excuse from the head maid to go and eat. She wanted to go and change back into her normal clothes. On her way, a hand held her from behind, making her turn, and as she turned, she was staring directly at the very crown prince, who himself was looking at her with a very interested expression. "So you think you're so smart, right? You actually thought no one saw what you did?" the crown prince asked her, while still staring her in the eyes. Akachi, who had always been daring, yanked her hands off the prince's grip and said, "I do not understand what you mean." Prince Ifejoha was very surprised by her reaction. Of all the women he had ever handled, none of them had ever had the guts to talk to him in such a manner. "Do you even know who you are speaking to, woman?" he asked her again. "You can be severely punished for what you just did." But Princess Akachi responded calmly, "Oh, I know, my prince." She added emphasis on "my prince" with a sarcastic note in her voice. The prince had never met such a feisty woman, so he became even more interested in her than he was initially. He slowly reached out for the scarf Akachi was wearing, and despite resistance from Akachi, he held her in place and removed the scarf from her face. It was the first time he saw Princess Akachi's face and was very surprised at the level of beauty he beheld. He had had dealings with many women in the past and had seen a lot of beautiful women, but he had never beheld a beauty like Princess Akachi's. He just kept staring at her until Akachi, who was already annoyed and slightly alarmed by the way the prince was looking at her, finally asked him, "What is wrong? Is there a problem? You already know my identity, so why do you keep looking at me like that?" she asked, clearly irritated. The prince jerked as if just coming back to reality, then replied with the same arrogant voice, "Nothing." She then replied, "My prince, if you'll please excuse me, the head maid has summoned me." The prince opened his mouth as if wanting to say something, but before he could voice anything, Akachi had already wriggled herself out of his grip and disappeared from sight. "My prince, your parents have been looking for you," a guard called out to him from a distance. The guard wore a worried look on his face, so it was clear to him that the prince had spent a lot of time thinking about Akachi. He hadn't even realized how long he had spent there. On his way home, and even during his bedtime, there was just one thing on his mind. What kind of woman is that maid? He asked himself as he kept thinking about Akachi. He had never seen a woman so feisty and beautiful in his entire life, and before he knew it, unknowingly to him, he had already started developing feelings for her. On the other hand, Akachi was very overjoyed with the influence she had on the prince. Her plan had worked, and the prince had developed some form of interest in her. She didn't know the prince had started developing actual feelings for her, but from the way the prince had stared at her that night, she knew she wasn't going to be seeing the last of him anytime soon. "Now, I will begin my mission," she said to herself excitedly before falling asleep. The next day, she was doing her chores when the prince summoned her for some small talk at the palace garden, just as she had expected. "My prince, you sent for me," she said upon reaching the garden, feigning surprise. The prince just looked at her and smiled. "Young maiden, you didn't tell me your name last night," he said, smiling. "But you didn't ask for it." "I'm Akachi, your highness, and also, you didn't tell me yours." I only know you as Crown Prince, she added. The prince smiled, clearly surprised and pleased by her question. I am Prince Ifejoha, beautiful one, he said. The prince then offered her a seat, and they began discussing. Akachi, seeing that the prince was now clearly attracted to her, took advantage of the discussion, pretending to reciprocate his actions towards her. She praised his kingdom and used the opportunity to ask him some questions about how his kingdom was so mighty. She asked her questions so innocently that the prince, being naive, just thought they were having a friendly conversation and slowly began to open up to her. After a while, a guard entered and summoned the prince. He glanced briefly at Akachi, clearly surprised by her presence with the prince, and even more by his genuine, bubbly expression. Being someone who was notoriously famous for his hostility and lurid behavior towards women, Kant, the prince's personal guard, quickly waved it off, dismissing the girl as one of the usual conquests, perhaps just a more special one. He then turned back to the prince, swiftly delivering his message before departing. Turning back to Akachi, the prince said, I'll see you around, dear, before leaving her. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and Prince Ifejoha and Akachi continued their clandestine meetings and friendly discussions until one day. The prince had summoned Akachi as usual but was surprised when the guard he had asked to call her told him, My prince, I know you want to see that maid today, but she is very sick and will not be able to come today. Take me to her at once, the prince ordered, and immediately the guard took him to Akachi. Leave, he told the guard, and the guard obeyed at once. As he opened the door to the maid's quarters and saw the condition of Akachi, he slowly walked up to her and held her hand, saying, My AKA, ever since the day I set my eyes on you, I have not been able to be myself. You recreated me. You have made me a new being. I miss you, my stubborn AKA. Please come back to me, he whispered, with tears choking him between words. But Akachi, who was unconscious, didn't hear any of his words. The prince then told the head maid to make arrangements to move Akachi to his room, as he wanted to take care of her personally. He took care of Akachi for weeks. One day, while he was feeding Akachi in his room, she slowly opened her eyes. She wanted to talk, but was too weak to even speak. The prince then explained everything to her, telling her to rest, and that they would talk more when she was fully recovered. When she did, he released her to go back to her duties. One day, as the prince summoned her to the garden for their usual discussions, she asked him the question that had been on her mind all along. My prince, why did you take a special interest in me while I was sick? I am nothing but your maid. The prince looked at her, his eyes glazed over with affection, as he replied, You are special, aka. And yes, you are right, I indeed have special interest in you. Akachi was taken aback a bit. She had always known the prince had a special interest in her, but she never expected him to voice it directly to her. She then realized that the prince's feelings for her were very true and sincere, not just a matter of lust, as it was rare for someone of his status and character to voice his feelings to anyone, much less a maid. She kept thinking about the prince's words throughout that day. She had already begun to develop actual feelings for the prince while he took care of her when she was sick. Some months passed, and Akachi was torn between her growing feelings for the prince and the mission her parents had entrusted to her. She now loved the prince deeply but did not want to disappoint her parents and people, as she was fully aware that they were heavily dependent on her success in her mission. She was discussing with the prince one morning when suddenly the prince took her hand and said to her, I would love to make you my wife as soon as possible, aka. Akachi just laughed it off, thinking it was one of his friendly jokes, but the prince stared at her intently, asking what she found funny in what he said before repeating his words again. Akachi was very surprised. She wasn't expecting it at all. She told the prince that she needed time to think about such a big decision, and with that, she went back to her room. She really loved the prince and wanted him just as much, but she knew that keeping her big secrets away from him would be the biggest betrayal. When the prince was discussing with Akachi the next day, asking her about his proposal, she suddenly said to him, I have something to tell you first before I can say anything concerning the proposal you made to me yesterday. Go on, my dear, the prince answered. She then began narrating to the prince everything about herself. How she was a princess from one of the neighboring villages they had captured and brought to his land to work as a maid, but in reality was actually a spy. Her mission was to get close to him and gather as much information about his land as she could so it could be used against them. She also explained how she had been pretending to be close to him during the early days of their friendship to fulfill the mission. The prince was very shocked at the revelation. She said to him, "The reason I'm even telling you this now is because I now love you sincerely and I want to be your wife. But I know I cannot betray your love for me like this, as you have been nothing short of good to me." The prince's expression slowly shifted from shock to deep hurt. He didn't imagine that the only woman he really fell in love with and sacrificed so much for had hidden so many grievances and hideous plans towards him. But when he looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of a lie, he saw nothing but sincerity. He further reasoned that she could have continued lying and pretending to him if she wanted to and could even have married him like that, but for her to open up and reveal these things to him, which he would have otherwise not discovered, meant that her words were sincere and her current feelings for him were indeed very true. He thanked her for trusting him with such a heavy secret and apologized for the actions of his people towards her people. After a long breath, he said, "Akam, I have a plan. I will soon be crowned as king, probably in a few months' time, as my father is now too old and wants to hand over his position to me. Since we will be getting married, I will set your people free, and then we can merge our kingdoms under one king and queen. That way, your people will be free without violence, and you won't have to keep any heavy secrets anymore." Akachi couldn't believe her ears. Her people were finally going to be free, and without any violence. She thanked the prince profusely for his wonderful suggestion. The prince told his parents about his interest in Akachi as a wife. There was initial disapproval because of her status as a slave, but they later had to agree, as their son, who was supposed to choose a bride as soon as possible before his coronation, which was already fast approaching, was very stubborn and refused to marry anyone other than Akachi. Likewise, the prince and Akachi met with Akachi's parents. They weren't taken as slaves, but were now living as commoners in their land. They told Akachi's parents about their plan to get married, and also their plans concerning their kingdoms. Her parents' expressions slowly shifted from initial surprise and disappointment to joy by the time they had finished talking. They thanked the gods for hearing their cries and gave Akachi and the crown prince their blessings. A month before the coronation of the prince, he and Akachi got married in a grand celebration that took place in the palace of Dunu. Akachi's parents and the chief priest of Achala were in attendance. A few days after the wedding, the king of Dunu passed away, and Prince Ifejoha was crowned king on the coronation day. As he promised, he set the people of Achala free from slavery. He then merged his kingdom and Achala together to be ruled under one king and queen and under the name that he and Akachi would collectively choose. He also commanded that his people treat the people of Achala with respect and promised to do his best to restore the kingdom of Achala to its former glory. He and Queen Akachi ruled the now merged kingdom jointly and equally, and they both lived happily ever after. And that, my children, is the end of our story, Maazi Udemba finally said, taking a deep breath as he wrapped up his tale. Chidima, the last of the children, squealed excitedly at almost the same time Maazi Udemba finished his story. "I'm so happy. Love won over vengeance in the end, and everybody got what they wanted. Such a sweet story. A very sweet one indeed, my dear. So now, Afani, what did you learn?" Maazi Udemba asked, directing his question to Afani as he looked to his right where Afani was seated. "Yes, uncle. Like Dinma already rightly pointed out, it is not everything that must be resolved through war and fight. Sometimes the solutions to our problems just lie in opening up and having simple conversations, like the prince." Afani was still speaking when his uncle suddenly cut him short with a wave of his hand. "It's okay, that's all right, my boy. How about you, Ibuka?" "Papa, I learned that sometimes the things that we desire might not actually be what's best for us, and blessings do actually come in disguise. So we should accept everything that comes our way with open arms, viewing them in a good light. For example, the king wanted to alter the gender of his unborn child to turn the child into a male because he wanted an heir. Let's assume he succeeded and actually changed Akachi to a man. Who would have saved his kingdom from the hands of the Dunu kingdom? Or would the prince of Dunu, Prince Ifejoha, have fallen in love with his fellow man? There would have been no throne for the heir to even inherit." "Rightly said, my children," rightly said. Maazi Udemba finally said, tapping the boys on their backs proudly. He wanted to dismiss the children, but then his eyes slowly drifted to Chidimma, who was raising her hand as if she too had something to say. You, Dimna, you learned something too? The old man asked the little girl, surprised. Chidimma wasn't one to always openly voice out the moral lessons she had learned during gatherings like this, given how shy she was. Yes, uncle, I learned something too, the girl muttered shyly while looking around. I learned that we should not be selfish. We should not be selfish? Was that really part of the morals of this story? I don't think so, but yes, my dear, we should not be selfish.
So don't be selfish. Like this video, pen down your comments, as well as additional moral lessons in the comment box below. Share this video, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more African stories with me, Maazi Udemba, and I'll see you in the next video.